Some of the nation's most successful sport and business leaders have come together to discuss the current challenges facing women in sport and identify where women in sport should be positioned by the year 2030.
The Women in Sport Advisory Group is expected to create game-changing strategies to increase the pace of improvement for women throughout Australia. I had the chance to sit down with a couple of the members to learn more.
She's done it. Ashley Barty wins her maiden Grand Slam singles title, and it comes here in Paris at Roland Garros.
Straight. Oh, Elise Perry, absolutely outstanding. She's put a boot out and stopped it.
Siren will sound from pioneers to premiers. The Western Bulldogs are the champions of AFLW.
When you look at the women now on the world stage, I mean the women in cricket, the women in netball, the women in soccer, it just goes on and on and on. Rugby. I mean, I don't care what sport a woman plays, so long as they're given an opportunity and we get our children off the couch and out playing active team-based sport. Not everybody's going to reach that Olympic level, but just give our kids, our girls, an opportunity to play the sport that they want to play and not just say it's only for boys. Girls should be given the same.
I think the world's kind of growing up and realising that it's not acceptable to have certain races or certain classes or certain genders sort of having a leg up. And so how do we try and make this equal for all and really give the opportunity that's in front of us? I think it's not only business, it's society. Sport creates mental and physical health and well-being. Sport and fitness are oftentimes team sorts of events, which mean that you have to build skills and attributes of human leadership, and all of these things are helpful for people in business and or other roles in society. So for me it's keep the kids and keep all people sort of active physically and mentally. This is not just about the sort of on the pitch people, it's also the administrators, the leaders, the governors, the system. And, you know, to sort of look at corporate Australia and the learnings in corporate Australia in getting women into the boardrooms, getting women into CEO roles, getting women into management roles, you need to build the funnel and pipeline of talent, and then you need to make sure that you are championing and bringing through those talented people in an equal way, or else you're never going to get that sort of equal representation at the highest levels.
Just seeing that women get a fair go. That's all that matters to me. I've always been about fairness and giving people the opportunity, if they're good, if it's a male or a female, it doesn't bother me, so long as I've got the best person for the job.
The questions need to be asked around who is mentoring and advocating and bringing through these wonderful female leaders. The questions need to be asked about why are people dropping out of the system at an early age and not encouraged and motivated through high school and then into university and elsewhere. So there's a myriad of different questions that I think now that we've got the aspiration that we want no boundaries, we now have to get hard to work at dissecting all of these various pieces and coming up with real sort of solutions to each of those opportunities. I think anything that's meaningfully changing a system or changing anything that's so ingrained in our cultures and in our society, I think is going to come with a degree of difficulty. Nothing of any significance changes in an easy way.
Just to see that women get the same opportunities as our male counterparts. That's all that matters to me. To me personally, that women get the same opportunities because I didn't get them. And if I can make 1% difference, I know I've done something good in my lifetime. So it's about being fair and equal.
Well, it's certainly something I could sit and talk about a whole lot more, and we are pleased to welcome Chair of the Women in Sport Advisory, Professor Claire Hanlon. We have former pro netballer Bianca Chatfield and the CEO of Sport Australia, Kate Palmer, joining us today. Thank you very much, ladies. First of all, Claire, I want to kick things off with you. You've said that this is an exciting time for women in sport. Tell me why that's the case.
This is an exciting time because, one, we've got the advisory group. The Australian Women in Sport Advisory Group has been established. Their first meeting was in May. Clear vision has been set. No boundaries for girls and women in sport and physical activity by 2030. Now, there's aspirations to achieve the no boundaries. And what does that mean? So no mandates, targets or quotas are needed for women in sport. To have equal pay and prize money, to have equal representation in senior leadership as well as in media coverage is so important. So too is it for girls and women to feel inspired by the opportunities and the welcoming environments that are provided by sport organisations so that they, throughout their life, can play, lead and work in sport.
Kate, welcome again, and this is a bit of a broad brushstroke. In your experience, what are some of the key barriers that prevent women and girls from participating in sport?
There are a range of barriers. At the community level, there are not enough change rooms for women and girls so they can participate equally, but all the way up to the elite level, it's where we reach not an opportunity for pathways to equal pay. So professional pathways are just not there. And we've had some really good examples where, for example, only 9% of the coaches that went to Rio in 2016 to the Olympic Games were females. The opportunities are just not there for them to be selected. So we're working with Claire, and I think this is a wonderful opportunity, great partnership with Victoria University to break down those barriers, invest in things that count and have a real impact on the participation of women and girls.
Claire, there's so many external factors, but there's also those factors inside homes and households, particularly if you go back historically. If you look at the 1950s and other eras like that where girls weren't, many girls and women weren't given that impetus to get out there and play sport, to compete.
We need to start on all levels, grassroots through to the elite level with sport. It needs to be a collaborative approach and not just on sport organisations. It's the education. We need to work with education. That includes universities, it includes primary schools, secondary schools, kindergartens. We need physical literacy, and physical literacy means that there's sport, physical activity, but the understanding about the importance of why we need to be physically active and being able to draw that through, because then that helps encourage more people that they then want to be involved in sport at a greater capacity. Research shows that women who participate when they're girls in sport are more likely to lead when they're older, and it's important to be able to provide those opportunities for girls when they're younger. Girls and boys like sport and recreation in different capacities. Boys tend to be more competitive when they're younger and they like that concept. Girls, the fun, the enjoyment. And it's important to understand the differences, but at the same time to bring that together in order to grow children into adults and for their passion of sport and physical activity. We also need to ensure that we have more women as leaders in sport. You can't be what you can't see. In order to achieve that, though, we need to make sure that there are opportunities for girls as leaders as well as for women as leaders. We also want to ensure that the role models that are wonderful role models in high performance, but also role models are mothers. Role models are daughters, are sisters, are cousins. Role models are team captains, so it's important to ensure that these girls can see other girls in leadership positions so then they can then see the steps and the clear pathways that can be achieved for them to coach, for them to be on boards, for them to be CEOs. It's an interesting time because strategies are being implemented and we do have evidence of success that's happening. But in relation to a national, proactive, coordinated approach, that hasn't happened yet. And that's why this advisory group have come together in order to identify the collaborative approaches, the game changes that can happen in order for women and girls to have no boundaries in sport and physical activity by 2030.
Kate, what can we do as members of the public to work towards this goal? Is it, and I read somewhere you even want us to change our language, it's something as simple as that it's not women's sport, that it's sport.
Yes, I'm a real advocate for removing the women's label and calling it just sport. And I think encouraging parents to understand that their daughters need to participate in sport to have a healthy life, or sport and physical activity. So as a community, I think that we're reaching a tipping point. There should be no more firsts. It should be quite normal for us to want our daughter to play AFLW or cricket or rugby. And I think making sure that we provide the right environment for their daughters or sisters or mothers to play is really, really critical. And I think we can have a role at Sport Australia by saying this is acceptable, and what is not acceptable is barriers that create lack of opportunity. So, we're investing in areas such as governance reform, and our governance system in sport in Australia was introduced in the 19th century, and I think it has to change. And those sorts of things can have a wonderful impact on families or communities understanding that we need to think more in a modern way about women's participation in society.
100%. And Bianca, thankfully there has been a lot of progress since you first started observing netball as a young girl and playing on the local courts.
Oh, absolutely. There's been a huge amount of change, and that's what's so exciting to see. But also that there's so much more that we can do in this space. And, I never was able to watch the Australian netball team play a test match. Like, I couldn't dream as a kid until I was about 10 or 11 and I started seeing it on the ABC. And now you can see it so much more. But, I think young people consume media in so many different ways these days. It's not just about, on TV. And there's so many different avenues like social media, digital platforms where we can put women's sport out there more so that every young girl can see what they can possibly do and grow up to be, if they just dream to play for Australia one day, they can see it.
It's so good to have you on.
Thank you very much, Claire, Bianca and Kate. This is something I could just talk to you about all afternoon, but thank you so much for joining us.